Have you ever wondered what it feels like to chase your dream when everyone you love is banking on you to fail? It was 7:30 p.m. on a Sunday when I walked into the celebration for my sister Chloe, graduating from Harvard Law. My mother was proudly adjusting her graduation gown, while my father couldn't stop telling our relatives that my daughter is going to be a federal judge. In the middle of all the fanfare, nobody saw me slip a small, plain envelope under the tiered cake. Why would they? Who pays attention to the family screw-up? The one who dropped out of a top-tier university to go play with a coffee machine. You know how some people have a single, life-altering moment? That one instant where your entire family looks at you as if you've just announced you're a sleeper agent from another galaxy? Mine landed on a Tuesday, right in the middle of my mom's birthday dinner, when I revealed I was dropping out of the Carroll School of Management at Boston College. With exactly one semester left to go, to open a coffee shop. My father, Edward Miller, a venerable federal judge, was carving a piece of prime rib. He let the fork clatter with dramatic finality against the porcelain plate. My mother, Dr. Eleanor Miller, a university professor with 2 PhDs, choked on her Cabernet Sauvignon, erupting into a coughing fit that sounded suspiciously like a panic attack. In retrospect, it probably was. "You're doing what?" My father's voice jumped several octaves, which was a feat for a man who could intimidate seasoned lawyers with a mere frown. "Leaving Boston College for coffee?" He said the word coffee as if I had just confessed to a plan to sell black tar heroin outside an elementary school. Chloe, my sister and Harvard's new golden girl, suddenly became intensely fascinated by her creme brulee, staring at it as if it held the secrets to the universe. "Leo, darling, you can't be serious." My mother, having recovered, was now strangling a linen napkin, as if it were personally responsible for my life's disastrous trajectory. "You are a Miller. We have a legacy. Your grandfather argued before the Supreme Court. Your father is a judge. Your sister will be a district attorney. And you want to, what, pour drinks?" Her eyes welled up as my dad muttered something about all those years of tuition, down the drain. I didn't know it then, but that was my last night in the house I grew up in. What would you do if your family begged you to abandon the one dream that made you feel truly alive? You're probably thinking I was insane for throwing away a guaranteed diploma for a caffeine-fueled fantasy, right? Well, just wait until you hear where I ended up after that dinner. "Are you sure I can't just crash in the guest room, just until I find a place?" There I was the next morning, a backpack slung over my shoulder, my AeroPress coffee maker tucked under my arm, and a look on my face that I can only imagine was genuinely pathetic. My father straightened his charcoal gray tie, the same one he wore when handing down particularly harsh sentences, and let out a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world. "Leo, you need to re-evaluate your decisions away from the comforts of your parents' home." He actually made air quotes, as if he were citing some tough love parenting manual from the Dr. Spock era that he probably kept hidden in his mahogany-paneled office. My mother couldn't even look at me. Instead, she obsessively rearranged the picture frames on the entryway table, all of them featuring Chloe at award ceremonies, debate championships, and me at, well, to be honest, there weren't many of me. And so, at 7:36 a.m. on a dreary, rain-promising Wednesday, I found myself knocking on the door of my best friend Mike's tiny apartment. He answered wearing nothing but a pair of faded Simpsons boxer shorts and the dazed expression of someone woken from a truly excellent dream. "Dude, they actually kicked you out?" He scratched his messy hair, yawning as I tried not to look as desperate as I felt. "You totally torched your life, man. But I got your back. Get in here." Mike's apartment was roughly the size of a large walk-in closet, with clothes draped over every available surface, and a unique aroma of stale ramen mixed with Axe body spray. Somewhere across town, I imagined my father sitting in his Italian leather armchair, signing some important judicial order, certain that this little taste of near homelessness would have me begging to re-enroll at BC within a week. But you know what he didn't get? I would rather sleep on Mike's lumpy couch with its mysterious stains than spend one more day pretending to be the person they wanted me to be. Have you ever felt like you were living out someone else's script for your life instead of writing your own? If you think sleeping on Mike's couch sounds humiliating, buckle up. It gets a whole lot worse before it gets better. And by worse, I mean a leaking ceiling and exactly 0 paying customers. 3 weeks, 17 rejections, and a whole lot of soul-searching later. I finally worked up the nerve to use the money I'd saved from 3 years of a banking internship. Money that was supposed to be for my master's degree, according to my parents. Instead, I signed a lease on what could generously be called a commercial space. In reality, it was little more than a broom closet with a storefront window, sandwiched between a vape shop and a dog groomer in Somerville. "You sure about this, man?" Mike asked as he helped me haul a battered wooden table I'd bought at a thrift store. "Like, really sure?" Sweat was pouring down his face as we trudged up a steep hill. "Because there's still time to call your dad, tell him you had a temporary quarter-life crisis, and go back to Boston College." I just smiled, feeling the weight of the table on my back, and a strange sense of freedom I couldn't quite articulate. The grand opening of The Honest Bean, a name that came to me in a dream and which I found incredibly profound, but Mike said sounded like a failed folk rock band, was what marketing experts might call an intimate event. Translated, that means exactly 5 people showed up. Mike, his girlfriend Anna, 2 passersby who thought we were giving out free samples, and Chloe, who arrived wearing oversized sunglasses and a scarf over her head as if she were on a covert CIA mission. "If Mom and Dad find out I'm here, I'm just going to say it was fieldwork for a case study on catastrophic business models," she whispered as she gave me a quick hug. As if on cue, the universe decided to emphatically prove her point. The second-hand espresso machine I'd bought from a failed restaurant suddenly died with a pathetic wheezing sound and a puff of steam. At that exact moment, it began to rain. Inside the shop, because a leak had opened up in the ceiling. A leak roughly the size of my own crushing momentary regret. Chloe, Mike, and Anna exchanged a look I was quickly learning to recognize. Pure, unadulterated pity. What my parents never grasped was that even standing there, soaking wet, with a broken machine and 0 paying customers, I felt more alive than I had in 4 years of business school. Have you ever done something that everyone else called insane, but in your heart, it was the only thing that made perfect sense? You know that feeling when you hit rock bottom and think, well, the only way is up. Don't trust that feeling, ever. Unless, of course, a world-class grump in a bespoke suit is about to walk through your door. Life has a twisted sense of humor, doesn't it? After 2 straight weeks of averaging 6 coffees a day, and 3 of those were for Mike, who was clearly buying them out of charity, everything changed on a miserable, rainy Tuesday. I was genuinely considering calling my dad to ask if that offer to move back home was still on the table when the door flew open with a bang. A man in a drenched, tailored suit stormed in, a phone glued to his ear. "No, I won't accept those terms. Kill the deal if you have to," he bellowed, shaking a broken umbrella and spraying water all over my freshly mopped floor. "And get me a decent cup of coffee in this godforsaken neighborhood." He snapped his phone shut, glared at me as if I were something he'd scraped off the bottom of his Italian leather shoes, and growled, "Give me the best damn coffee you've got. Now." My hands were shaking so badly I spilled half the beans I was weighing. In a state of pure panic, I blindly mixed a batch of the special Ethiopian beans I'd been saving for an occasion that never seemed to arrive with some high-altitude Costa Rican beans I'd roasted the day before. I accidentally ground them finer than I should have, used water that was a few degrees too cool, and then, in a moment of sheer desperation, added a tiny pinch of cinnamon, a trick my grandmother always used in her old farmhouse kitchen. The result was, well, a complete and total accident. The man, who I would later learn was Arthur Sterling, CEO of a chain of boutique hotels, took a sip. He grimaced so intensely I thought he was about to have me arrested. And then, his eyes widened. "What is this?" I froze, expecting to be sued for attempted poisoning. Instead, he took another, slower sip. "This is extraordinary. How did you do this?" he asked, suddenly looking at me as if I had just pulled a rabbit out of a hat. That was the moment my entire world flipped on its axis. Ever have one of those moments? Where you do everything completely wrong, and somehow, by a cosmic fluke, it turns out to be exactly right. You're probably thinking, okay, this is where his big break happens, right? As if life is ever that simple. But what if I told you that a total disaster was precisely what saved me? "Do you have an exclusivity deal with anyone?" Arthur asked me 3 coffees later. He was sitting at the only stable table in the place, his expensive suit now almost dry. I just stared at him like an idiot, not even processing the question. "A deal for what?" I replied, nervously wiping down the already spotless counter. Arthur rolled his eyes with the impatience of a man whose time is billed in 4-figure increments. "I want your coffee in all of my hotels. Exclusive rights. I'll pay you up front." The contract was drafted on the back of a pizza box lid because I couldn't afford printer ink, and my gently used printer had decided to go on permanent strike. Arthur didn't even blink. He just pulled a Mont Blanc pen from his pocket, scrawled out the terms, signed it, and slid it over to me. "This is going to change your life, kid. I hope you're ready." He left as abruptly as he had arrived, leaving behind a check with more zeros than I had ever seen in one place and a gold-embossed business card. 2 weeks after that, I got a call from a food critic at the Boston Globe. "We're doing a feature on the city's hidden gems. A source mentioned we should try your place." She showed up the next day, tasted my accidental blend, which I still wasn't sure I could perfectly replicate, and snapped a few photos of the tiny space. I figured it would be a small blurb at the bottom of a page, the kind no one reads. I was wrong. So wrong. The article was published on a Thursday. By Friday morning, there was a line down the block before I even opened. On Saturday, an influencer with 2 million followers posted a video of herself literally weeping into her cup, calling it a transcendental experience that healed her relationship with hot beverages forever. On Sunday, I had to close early because I ran out of coffee beans. On Monday, 3 different venture capitalists left their cards. On Tuesday, a reporter from the New York Times showed up. And this was all happening while I was still sleeping on a leaky air mattress in the tiny back storeroom, scribbling recipes in a coffee-stained notebook, trying to figure out what the hell was happening to my life. Ever felt like you've been swept up in a tornado, and you can't tell if you're flying or just falling with style? Unbelievable how things can change, right? One day you're begging your landlord for an extension on rent, the next there's a line around the corner. But the most surreal part was yet to come. "So, you need help." It wasn't a question. Cecilia Tanaka, a 3-time U.S. barista champion, was standing in front of me, arms crossed, with a dead serious expression. The line outside my shop now snaked around the corner. I hadn't slept properly in 3 days. My hair looked like a bird had tried to nest in it, and I was sweating in places I didn't know could produce sweat. Why are you here?" I managed to stammer. Cecilia sighed as if she were dealing with a particularly slow toddler. "I saw you in the Globe. Then I saw that influencer's melodrama. I was curious." She scanned the organized chaos that had become my life. "You clearly have no idea what you're doing." Again, it wasn't a question. I swallowed hard, considered denying it, and then just nodded. "I really don't. Not a clue." To my shock, she cracked a smile. "Good. At least you're honest." She grabbed a spare apron, tying it around her waist with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done it 10,000 times. "I'll be your partner, 30%, and I'm going to teach you how not to screw up whatever it is you accidentally created here." Before I could even form a response, she was already behind the counter, serving customers and crafting drinks with the grace of a ballet dancer and the precision of a surgeon. Within 3 hours, she had completely overhauled my workflow, cut the wait time in half, and somehow found a moment to teach me how to consistently replicate my own accidental creation. 6 months later, we opened the second Honest Bean in Back Bay. 4 months after that, the third location launched in the Seaport District. 3 months later, our fourth opened in the Shops at Prudential Center, the very same mall where my mother used to buy her outfits for special occasions. Never once imagining, I'm sure, that her failure of a son would one day have a business there. The meetings with lawyers and accountants felt like an out-of-body experience. I would show up in a coffee-stained t-shirt while they discussed valuations that made my head spin. It was in one of those meetings that I realized I was now earning more than my father, the esteemed federal judge. It was a strange, hollow victory. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated. Instead, all I felt was a pang of sadness that I couldn't share any of this with my family. Have you ever achieved something incredible, only to realize it means nothing if you have no one to celebrate with? Impressed? Just wait. There's something deeply bizarre about making money you have no time to spend because you're too busy working. The time had come to invest in something truly meaningful, or so I thought. "This is the one, sir." The real estate agent, a guy named Josh with perfectly coiffed hair and teeth so white they seemed to generate their own light, swung open the door to a condo still under construction in the Seaport. 1,700 square feet, 3 bedrooms, wraparound balcony with harbor views, chef's kitchen. As he droned on, I was just trying to process the fact that I could actually buy this. An apartment. My own. Not an air mattress in a storeroom or Mike's lumpy couch. My palms were sweating so much I handed the glossy brochure back to Josh, completely wrinkled. He didn't seem to notice, too busy pointing out where the custom cabinetry and the soaking tub would go. "The building won't be completed for another 2 years, but for an investor of your profile, I believe this is an exceptional opportunity." An investor? Me? The same guy who, not long ago, lived on instant ramen and considered stealing ketchup packets from fast food joints a viable budgeting strategy? I signed the contract that afternoon, driven by an impulse that was equal parts euphoria, terror, and a sharp, ugly feeling I later recognized as revenge. I won't lie. A part of me bought that apartment to one day shove it in my parents' faces. A big, gleaming glass and steel monument to, "I told you so." It sounds pathetic, I know. But who hasn't felt that burning desire to prove their worth to the very people who doubted them? The irony was, as I signed a check larger than anything I had ever touched, I didn't feel successful. I felt like a little kid playing dress-up in his father's suit, praying no one would notice the fraud. In the weeks that followed, I'd visit the construction site. It was just a massive hole in the ground. But I'd stand there, staring into it, imagining the day I could show it to them. In my fantasy, my father would be speechless. My mother would weep with pride, and Chloe would finally stop sending me links to stable entry-level corporate jobs her law school friends could get me. But a nagging little voice in my head kept asking, "Are you building this for them or for you? And why? With all this success, do you still feel like that lost kid who got kicked out with an AeroPress under his arm?" A luxury condo was supposed to make me feel like I'd arrived, right? So why did I still feel like a scared kid playing make-believe? The truth is, things were about to get a lot weirder. Forbes is thrilled to name Leo Miller to this year's 30 Under 30 list for food and drink. The announcement felt like a glitch in the Matrix. I stumbled through the photo shoot for the magazine feature, a classic Leo move, and stared at the camera like a deer in headlights. The photographer kept shouting things like, "Give me innovator, give me disruptor," and all I could think was, "Give me a paper bag to breathe into." Innovator of the year? Me? The guy who still watched YouTube tutorials to figure out his own business taxes? The guy who left post-it notes for himself that said, "Partner, Cecilia," not Jessica or Jennifer, because I was terrified of mixing up the name of the most important person in my company? 2 weeks after that humiliating experience, I received an email I almost deleted as spam. It was from a multinational food and beverage corporation, and they wanted to discuss licensing the Honest Bean for distribution in 32 countries. 32. I spiraled into such a profound panic that I spent the next hour Googling things like, how to handle accidental success, and, is terminal imposter syndrome a real diagnosis? Then I called Mike. "Dude, I have no idea what I'm doing," I confessed, staring at the email for the 10th time. Mike sighed on the other end of the line. "Nobody does, man. Nobody ever really does." I was about to argue that, yes, some people clearly knew what they were doing, when a notification popped up on my screen. Cecilia had just finalized a deal with a new grower in Panama for a geisha bean varietal she believed would be perfect for our upcoming reserve line. Our line. The business was real. My success was real. I just couldn't understand how or why it was happening to me. Have you ever been so afraid of losing something that you couldn't even enjoy having it? As if at any moment, someone was going to tap you on the shoulder and say, "Sorry, there's been a mistake. This wasn't meant for you." I don't think I ever quite shook that feeling that someone would find me out. And in the meantime, in a truly pathetic way, I started spying on my own family. Okay, this is pretty embarrassing to admit, but I made a fake Instagram account. Connor Walsh, 28, a financial analyst who loves hiking and craft beer. Connor doesn't exist, but he can do one thing Leo Miller can't. Follow my sister, Chloe, without setting off a family-wide DEFCON 1 alert. Through the digital eyes of the fictional Connor, I pieced together the life my family was living without me. And that's how I found out she was graduating. I saw the pictures of the preparations, my mom trying on dresses for the ceremony, my dad polishing his special occasion dress shoes. I saw the elegant gold-embossed invitation Chloe posted to her stories. They're finally here. Can't believe it's almost time. Wait to hand them out to everyone. Everyone but me, of course. Or so I thought. Until an identical envelope arrived at the main coffee shop forwarded by Chloe. Attached was a yellow post-it note. "Our parents have no idea I'm sending this. But I really want you to be there, even if you just stand in the back and leave before the toast. Dude, you have to go and shove your success right in their faces." Mike practically screamed when I told him about the invitation, nearly spilling his cappuccino. He had always been aggressively on Team Leo. "You should, roll up in some ridiculous sports car, making it rain $100 bills." I rolled my eyes. "I don't own a ridiculous sports car, Mike." He waved his hand dismissively. "Details, details. But for real, you're going, right? After everything they said?" I stared at the invitation for a long time that night, sitting on the edge of my bed in my nondescript rented apartment. I still couldn't bring myself to spend real money on furniture for a place I barely slept in. The ceremony was in a month. My seaport condo, miraculously ahead of schedule, would be ready in 2 weeks. An idea, a dangerous and thrilling one, began to take shape. What if, instead of shoving my success in their faces, as Mike so eloquently put it, I did something truly meaningful, something that proved not only that I had made it, but that I still cared? Have you ever wanted to prove something so badly you could barely tell the difference between pride and love? The thing about secrets and fake profiles is that they always find a way of making your life more complicated. And now I had a graduation to attend, and a massive decision to make. Honestly, I've done some ridiculous things in my life, like the time I tried to assemble a piece of IKEA furniture without the instructions, and ended up creating a sculpture that was both structurally unsound and an insult to Swedish design. But nothing compares to the level of neurotic paranoia I reached while preparing for Chloe's graduation. I spent 3 hours choosing an outfit. 3 hours. Me, the guy who usually just grabs the first t-shirt without a coffee stain. Casual, but obviously expensive, I muttered to my reflection, trying on the 10th combination. I landed on dark wash designer jeans, a crisp navy blue button-down, and a blazer Cecilia had forced me to buy for important meetings with people who judge you. On my feet were a pair of Italian sneakers that cost more than my first month's rent for the original shop. On my wrist was a watch Arthur Sterling had given me when we closed the international deal. "So you can be on time for our meetings," he'd said, as if that was my biggest problem in life. I rehearsed facial expressions in the mirror. "Oh, hello. What a surprise seeing you all here." A look of feigned shock, as if I hadn't known it was my own sister's graduation. "No, I harbor absolutely no resentment for you treating me like the evolutionary dead end of the Miller family." A serene, zen-like smile of a man who has risen above it all. "Coffee? Oh yeah, I have a little shop. Well, 4 of them. A few scattered around the world now, I guess." Casual, bored, as if discussing the weather and not my accidental caffeine empire. I placed the keys to the new apartment in a small navy blue velvet box that looked like it should hold an engagement ring. I personally roasted and ground a special batch of geisha coffee to bring as a gift. I ran through my lines another 500 times. And yet, when I arrived at the reception hall at Harvard Law School, I tripped on the welcome mat, nearly took out a 3-tiered cake adorned with the university's crimson seal, and spilled champagne down the tie of an elderly gentleman who, I would later discover, was the dean of the school. Some things, it turns out, never change, no matter how much money is in your bank account. Do you also have that superpower of ruining perfect moments with inexplicable physical clumsiness? Or is that just me? 3 hours of prep, a mirror rehearsal, and a little gift box that could change everything. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what would happen inside that party. "Leo, you actually came!" Chloe threw her arms around me, hugging me so tight I thought my ribs might crack. She looked stunning in her black graduation gown, her mortarboard perched perfectly on her dark hair. Over her shoulder, I saw my parents freeze. My father adjusted his tie, his go-to move when he was uncomfortable. My mother blinked several times, as if I were a mirage that might vanish if she just wished hard enough. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad." My voice was smaller than I'd planned. Where was the confident CEO with international deals? He'd apparently evaporated on contact with parental disapproval. We stood there in a circle of mutual awkwardness until my mother finally broke the silence. "You look different." It wasn't exactly, "I'm so proud of you, son," but it was something. My father just gave a solemn, single nod. "Chloe told us you have a coffee shop now." He said, "coffee shop," the way one might say a minor, but persistent, skin rash. But at least he wasn't completely ignoring me. Things took a nosedive when the speeches began. The dean spoke, then a distinguished professor. Then my father was called up to say a few words as the parent of a distinguished graduate. He adjusted his glasses and took on what I called his judge stance, the one that made defendants confess to crimes they hadn't even committed. "We are here today to celebrate not just diplomas, but the making of correct life choices." He looked directly at me on the word, correct. He went on, "My daughter Chloe has always understood the importance of a formal education, of the traditional path to success." Another penetrating stare in my direction. My mother, not to be outdone in the unofficial, "make your son feel like garbage in public competition," added when it was her turn. Chloe never disappointed us. She always knew how to honor the family name. Then, As if realizing she was being too obvious, she quickly tacked on, and we are so happy that the whole family could be here to celebrate. With a smile so forced it looked painful. That's when Chloe, my sister, my unexpected hero, interrupted her own toast. Actually, she said, holding her champagne flute high, I'd like to invite my brother Leo to the stage. He has something he'd like to share with us. And every single head in that hall turned to look at me. You know that feeling of wanting the floor to open up and swallow you whole? Yeah, that. You know that feeling when all eyes turn to you and your mind goes completely blank? Yeah. Now imagine that, but with your parents in the front row, just waiting for you to fail. With my legs shaking like jello in an earthquake, I made my way to the small stage. Chloe gave me an encouraging hug and whispered in my ear, "Show them, little brother." I turned to face roughly 200 people, my shell-shocked parents sitting in the front row. My mind was a clean slate. A freshly formatted hard drive. Nothing. Zero. A complete void. I came here tonight. I cleared my throat, stalling for time as my brain desperately searched for the words I had practiced for days. To congratulate my sister. Chloe smiled, nodding for me to go on. And, also, to give her a gift. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped the small velvet box as I pulled it from my pocket. Chloe has always believed in me, even when it seemed like a crazy idea. I took a deep breath. It was now or never. When I left home to open a coffee shop, everyone thought I was throwing my life away. Well, that crazy idea has grown into a chain with 4 locations in Boston, international distribution deals, and I opened the box, revealing a single, gleaming key. This condo I just closed on in the seaport. A collective murmur rippled through the room. My father dropped his champagne flute, and it shattered on the floor with a crystalline crash. My mother's eyes were wider than I had ever seen them. But that's not all, I continued, the words now tumbling out, unstoppable, as if a dam had burst inside me. I also signed a deal with a multinational corporation to export my coffee to 32 countries. Last month it won a Golden Bean Award for Best Specialty Roast in America. I pulled out my phone and, with trembling fingers, swiped through photos of the bustling cafes, the roasting facility, the bags of beans stamped with the Honest Bean logo. I landed on the final picture, the international contract, with the value of the deal highlighted in yellow, $1.5 million. More than my father would make in a decade on a federal judge's salary. And I did it all without a college degree. I finished, unable to keep a sharp note of pride out of my voice. A dead silence fell over the hall. Then, unexpectedly, Chloe started to applaud. Soon her classmates joined in. Then the entire room was clapping. Everyone, that is, except my parents, who looked as if they'd been turned into statues. Have you ever had a moment of pure triumph that also made you feel incredibly guilty? As if you were being petty for needing to prove a point. Showing your success is one thing. But what do you do when you realize the victory isn't as sweet as you imagined? It was time for a little coffee. And a lot of truth. Anyone for some coffee? I asked after the applause died down. I pulled my portable brewing kit from my bag. A hand grinder, a gooseneck kettle, a pour-over cone, and the special geisha beans I had roasted the night before, specifically for this moment. It felt ridiculously theatrical, but hey, I own coffee shops. If I can't be dramatic about coffee, what's the point? A few guests smiled, intrigued. Others whispered amongst themselves, likely dissecting the rebel son's little performance. I began the ritual, my movements now second nature, grinding the beans to the perfect consistency, heating the water to a precise temperature, pouring in slow, deliberate circles over the grounds. A rich, inviting aroma began to fill the hall. Suddenly I noticed my father staring at my hands with a strange, almost wistful expression. "You still use your grandfather's method," he said softly, more to himself than to me. It felt like a bucket of ice water had been dumped over my head. My grandfather? My mother's father, whom I had barely known. I looked at him, confused. "What are you talking about?" My father cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Your grandfather, he prepared coffee just like that, the circular pour. He said it was the secret to keep it from turning bitter." My mother drifted closer, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "The coffee you brought. It smells like my childhood. Like the coffee my father used to make on Sunday mornings." And there, in the middle of a graduation party, serving coffee to strangers and my stunned family, I finally learned the truth. I learned that my maternal grandfather, an immigrant from Italy, had owned a small, beloved coffee roastery in Boston's North End. I learned that he had lost everything during the brutal recession of the 1970s, when his business failed overnight. I learned that he then had to sell his shop for pennies on the dollar and work construction to support his family. And I learned that my mother, having witnessed how a single passion could lead to financial devastation, had sworn that her children would only follow safe, predictable paths. Have you ever discovered you were repeating someone's history without even knowing it? I confess, I never expected a simple coffee ritual to uncover a secret family history. And that was just the beginning of the night's revelations. So, you're not bankrupt, my father stated after taking a hesitant sip of the coffee I'd served him. I had to stifle a laugh. For a man who passed judgment on complex legal cases, my father could be astonishingly blunt. No, Dad. Not bankrupt. In fact, things are going pretty well. Understatement of the year. We were now sitting at a quiet table in the corner, just the four of us, as the party continued around us. I was wrong. The words seemed to physically pain him as they left his mouth. Edward Miller, a man so sure of himself he had a painted portrait in his own office, was admitting a mistake. I probably should have recorded it for posterity. I was so afraid you would fail that I didn't see I was stopping you from even trying. He adjusted his glasses, looking anywhere but at me. It was unfair. And I'm sorry. Before I could fully process the fact that my father had just apologized, an event roughly as common as a total solar eclipse, Chloe dropped another bombshell. Well, while we're in the spirit of confession, she said, swirling her champagne, I have something to admit, too. She took a deep breath, looked our parents straight in the eye, and fired her shot. I hate law. I've always hated it. I only did it because it's what you wanted. My mother actually gasped, which would have been comical in any other context. My father looked like he'd been struck by lightning, completely frozen. But you were always so, he stammered, unable to finish. Dedicated, focused, driven. Chloe finished for him. Of course I was. I couldn't let you down. Not after Leo left. Someone had to be the perfect child. The silence that followed was so thick, it felt like it had a physical weight. Then, to my utter astonishment, Chloe turned to me, a determined glint in her eyes. I've always wanted to work in the culinary world. I took online courses. I studied on my own. And now, Leo, I want to make you a proposition. She held up the apartment key I had given her. I will accept your gift, on one condition. You let me manage your next expansion. My parents looked like their entire operating system was crashing in real time. First, their rebel son returns as a successful international entrepreneur. Next, their perfect daughter confesses that she despises the very career she just earned a degree for. It was as if their whole universe was being rewritten before their eyes. Another child, wasting their education, my father murmured, but the usual condemnation was gone from his voice. It was replaced by the sound of a man who was just now realizing he might have been wrong about, well, about everything. Have you ever watched someone's entire worldview crumble in a single moment? It's both terrifying and mesmerizing. Then, something even more surprising happened. My father, the formidable Judge Edward Miller, picked up the cup of coffee I had poured for him and asked, hesitantly, if he could try to make one himself. I want to see if I remember, he said, his hands surprisingly unsteady. Your grandfather taught me once, before everything went wrong for him. I handed him the grinder, and our fingers brushed against each other. It was the first time we had touched in nearly 2 years. As my father awkwardly tried to grind the beans, spilling half of them on the table, a spontaneous idea hit me. Hey, why don't we all go see the apartment right now? I suggested, surprising even myself. It's completely empty, but I have the keys. It's just over in the seaport. Chloe's face lit up immediately. Yes, let's go now. She started gathering her things, clearly desperate for an escape from her own graduation party. My mother, always the voice of reason, began, but the party, and then she stopped, as if she was reevaluating every piece of advice she'd ever given. She looked at me, then at Chloe, then at my father with coffee grounds on his fingertips, and she shrugged, a gesture I had never seen her make in my entire life. You know what? Let's go. The ceremony is over. We have a lot to talk about. And just like that, the Miller family quietly slipped out of a Harvard Law graduation party to go see the new apartment of the son who had thrown his life away. Life really does have a peculiar sense of humor, doesn't it? A father's apology and a sister's rebellion. You'd think the universe was done with its plot twists for the day. And then, as if things couldn't get any more surreal. So, this is it. I unlocked the door to the seaport condo, feeling a potent mix of pride and raw nerves. The air still smelled of fresh paint, and the place was completely bare, except for a single, cheap folding lawn chair I'd left in the middle of the living room from my last visit. Maybe bringing my family to an unfurnished apartment wasn't my brightest idea, but it was too late now. To my shock, my parents and Chloe walked into the empty space as if they were touring a palace. My mother ran her hand along the quartz countertop, gazed out the floor-to-ceiling window at the glittering city skyline, and commented on the quality of the hardwood floors. My father, in true dad fashion, started checking the water pressure in the sink and inspecting the circuit breaker panel with the same forensic focus he applied to his legal cases. Chloe just spun in circles in the middle of the empty room, laughing the way she used to when we were kids. "You did this, Leo. You really did this," my mother said, her voice thick with emotion. She rarely called me Leo. It was usually Lucas, in a tone that dripped with disapproval. "Your grandfather. He would be so proud." That comment hung in the air, stopping everyone. My father paused his inspection of the refrigerator's warranty sticker. "Seriously, who does that?" "You never talk about your father," he said, his voice soft. My mother shrugged, trying to appear casual, but I could see her eyes were glistening. "You know, Leo," she said after a moment of silence, "it wasn't that I didn't believe in you. I was just so scared. I watched my own father lose everything because of coffee. I saw how much he suffered." She walked over to the window, looking out at the city below. "When you said you wanted to follow that same path, it was like seeing a ghost. It felt like history was doomed to repeat itself. It was a strange, powerful revelation. All this time, it was never disappointment my mother felt. It was fear, pure, genuine fear, of watching me suffer the same fate as her dad. Have you ever had that moment when you suddenly realize your parents are just people, doing their best to navigate the world with the scars they carry? I never told my family that during the 2 years they thought I was just surviving, I was coaching corporate executives on coffee tasting for hefty consulting fees. That I slept in the storeroom not just out of necessity, but to personally test every single batch of beans that arrived. What do you choose? The path that others have mapped out for you, or the one you have to build yourself, even if it means laying the bricks in the dark?